Welcome back everybody, Mike here. Today's video is for everyone that uses firewood, and it doesn't matter if you cut, split, and stack firewood for your own use, whether you cut firewood to sell, or whether you're buying firewood. But I hope it'll be most beneficial for people that are buying firewood. You know, some people don't have woods of their own, but they like to buy wood, and they have to buy it. And when you buy firewood, you know, usually you just kind of take the guy's word for it that the wood is seasoned and ready to burn. But today we're going to talk about like 5 or 6 different ways that you can determine whether your wood is dry enough to burn on your own, and you don't have to just take somebody's word for it. Now, first off, I'm going to talk about different hardwoods like red oak and cherry. That's primarily what we use around here. I live in Pennsylvania. Most of you that follow this channel know that. I live in western Pennsylvania, and we have an abundance of firewood. We're almost firewood snobs in this area. We would never consider burning pine, but everybody out west does, and they don't have any problems with it. So I'm anxious to see in the comments all the different species of woods that people burn from all over the world, wherever you're at. I know a lot of people out west, you know, they burn all different sorts of pines. They don't have the hardwoods that we do, and I'm just not familiar with that, so I'm going to talk about the hardwoods here in the Northeast. Now, first of all, you want your firewood to be around 20% moisture content or less to be ready to burn. And different woods take different amount of times to dry. Like around here, cherry dries faster than red oak, but red oak is denser and heavier, and it holds more water, and it just takes longer to dry than cherry. Like if you split cherry relatively small, about 6-8 months, it's good to go. It's below 20% moisture content. Where even oak split real small, it's well over a year before it's ready to burn. Now, what are the disadvantages of burning wood that's not properly dried? You know, first off, you're wasting energy because you're using a lot of energy to warm that water that's still in that wood and convert it to steam. So you have to burn more wood to get the same amount of heat. So you're wasting wood, and there's also the problem with creosote in your chimney, and you get more smoke when you burn green wood. It burns much more efficiently when it's nice and dry. So that's basically it. You know, those are the reasons you don't want to burn wet wood. It's less efficient, you waste more, and you have to clean your chimney more, and quite frankly, it's kind of dangerous. So how can you tell if your firewood is dry? I'll go over a few ideas right now. So what I have to show you, I have 2 pieces of red oak right here. Now this tree was cut down the first week of September this year, so that was about 5 weeks ago. However, that tree was dead for about 6 or 8 months before I cut it down. So it did start to dry a little bit, but even if they've been dead and standing for a year or 2 years, like a red oak, it's still not going to be dry. The only way it's going to dry is once it's cut down, cut up, split, and stacked. That's the only way it's going to dry, unless you have a kiln, of course. But just cutting down a dead tree is not going to be dry enough to burn. Possibly ash, but definitely not red oak and cherry. So anyway, these are the first 2 pieces. Then I have 2 pieces of red oak that were cut, split, and stacked 1 year ago. And this came from a green living tree that blew down, but it was alive when it fell over. Next, I have 2 pieces of cherry. These were cut, split, and stacked about 6 months ago. And they are well on their way to being ready to burn, if not ready to burn right now. And lastly, I have 2 pieces of cherry right here. They were both cut the first week of September as well, and I just split them this evening. The first way to know if your firewood is ready to burn is pretty simple. If you cut, split, and stack it yourself. That way you're going to know how long, you know, that wood's been stacked and drying, and you're going to have a pretty good idea if it's ready to burn or not. Especially if you burn the same species each year, you get to know, you know, pretty well what's going on with it. You know, like I was saying earlier, red oak that I use a lot, and cherry, red oak, a minimum of 1 year, probably more like a year and a half, even if it's split kind of small. Cherry, about 8 months, it's ready to go. So if you cut, split, and stack it yourself, you're going to already know that. So that's the first way. The second way to help determine if your firewood's ready to burn is if the bark is very loose and falling off of it. Now, but all that is an indication that the tree has been down for a while. It doesn't mean it was cut, split, and stacked for a long period of time. You know, you cut a tree down right here in the woods and come back a year later, the bark's going to fall off of it, but that wood's not going to be dry and ready to burn inside. But that's something you can look at, whether the bark's loose or whether the bark's still tight. Another way to give you at least some idea whether the wood's dry or not is the color of it. Like, take a look at this piece of red oak. Now, although this tree was dead for a while before I cut it down the 1st of September, I just recently split it, and look what it looks like compared to a piece that has been sitting in a firewood pile for about a year. There's a big difference there. But even this green piece, if I set this out here for 5 or 6 months on a stack, it's going to look almost like this, but it's not going to be dry and ready to burn yet. So that's the third thing to at least kind of give you an indication if you're on the right track or not. Now, a fourth way to help determine if your firewood's dry enough to burn is look for cracking and checking on the ends. And once again, that's not a definite, but it does give you some idea, you know, if that wood has been drying for a while. At least it wasn't just cut down and delivered to you. You can know by that. Now, the fifth way, this is starting to give you a really good indication on whether that wood is dry or not. And that's by the weight. Because obviously, the drier it gets, the less water it has in it, and the less it's going to weigh. So if you have a piece of old oak that had been dried for 2 or 3 years, or from last year's pile, and they deliver you a pile of new oak, pick up 2 pieces about the same size, and you can tell right away or not if that new piece is dry or not. Now, here's a great example right here. Here's a piece of red oak that has been drying about a year. It weighs 3.64 pounds. All right. Now, I know these pieces aren't exactly the same size, but this one's pretty close. And it weighs 5.25 pounds. This one is a little bit bigger dimension than this one, but not that much bigger. Let's look at some cherry. That piece of cherry weighs 3.67 pounds. It's been drying for a long time. Now, here's a piece of cherry. It's actually a little smaller, but it's green, and it weighs 5.18 pounds. So weight is definitely a great way to tell if your firewood is dry or not. Another way to determine if your firewood is dry is how it sounds. I'll give you an example. This is the green red oak. All right, now listen to this. That's green red oak. This is dry red oak. Hear how it sounds different? It's like higher pitched. The wet stuff, it's more like a thud. Dry stuff, it kind of clings a little bit. It's a higher pitched sound, dry firewood. Now, all the ways that we talked about whether you cut, split, and stack the wood yourself and you know how long it's been drying. That's a great way to know if your firewood's dry. We talked about the color of the firewood. All that is an indication. It's not a telltale sign on whether your wood is dry enough to burn, but it kind of helps. We talked about the bark. If the bark's falling off, all that really tells you the tree's been dead for a while. Doesn't really tell you how dry it is, but it gives you some indication at least the tree's been dead for a while. Same with the checking and the cracking on the ends. It's a good indicator it's been drying, but it doesn't tell you, if it's below 20% or not. The color of the wood, we talked about that. Yeah, wood's been split and stacked for a little while, but you really don't know how long. And we talked about the sound of the firewood. You know, that kind of helps too. But the two biggest things are the weight, which we went over, and the last thing that I want to show you is this. This is by far the best way to determine if your firewood is dry or not. It's a moisture meter. Now, like this meter here, it's kind of a cheapo, but it works great. It's like 29 bucks, I think it is. And I will put a link in the description, you know, an Amazon link for one of these. But if you're buying a lot of firewood and, you know, say you buy $400 or $500 worth of wood a year, 29 bucks, before the guy unloads it, you can check a few pieces of wood to see if it's dry or not. I'll show you how this works. So first off, we'll check the green red oak. Like I said, this tree had been dead for a while, just cut down the first week of September and just split tonight. It's at about 25% moisture content, and that will take a long time to get down to 20%. And keep in mind, like I said, this tree has been dead for at least 6 months before I even cut it down. 25% moisture content. This piece of oak has been cut, split, and stacked for about a year. (12.2%). Premium, ready to burn. This cherry's been drying about 6 or 8 months, something like that. (8.7% moisture content). Now, something to remember that's important with these moisture meters. Remember this piece of oak? On the outside of it, it's showing 12.2% moisture content. Now I just split it one more time and got like a fresh edge, so I'm going to test it in the center. About 17.8%. So if you have wood delivered, it might be a good idea to split a piece in half, check the center of it. This piece is still ready to burn. It's well under 20%, but that shows you these moisture meters. You get a different reading. On the outside, 12%. Then on the inside, 17%. So out of all that, I would say the best 3 ways in this order to tell whether your firewood's dry enough is: 1, if you cut, split, stack it yourself and you know how long it's been drying. That'd be number 1. Number 2 is by weight. You can definitely tell the difference between green wood and dry wood by the weight. That's a really good way. But the third way and best way, in my opinion, is a moisture meter. And like I said, if you want one of these, I will put a link in the description. And something I want to mention, nothing to do with that, I want to thank everybody that has subscribed to this channel. My birthday's coming up this weekend, and when I started this thing, I wanted to get 1,000 subscribers by my birthday. No idea why I set that goal. I just did. And I thought if I can get 1,000 by then, I'll just keep going with it. Because I've really only been doing this kind of on a regular basis for 6 or 7 months, and we're almost to 8,000 subscribers. So blew me away. Way better than what I expected. So I'm just going to keep going with that. And if you enjoy these videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, like, comment below, and I'd like to hear from you guys that burn the pine out west. Like I said, we're kind of snobs out here in the east with all this hardwood. There's so much of it, it's like grows on trees. But anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.